dirty little secrets and campaign tactics. And one of the ones I've been fascinated by this election is this Build a Ballot tool, which claims to be completely neutral and just helping you to find out who you might want to vote for, but is actually really twisted, is designed to lead you off into the way they want. So let's have a look at how it works. So let's go to the quiz that they ask you. So you have to answer a few of these questions. So the first is, how should the federal government help ease cost of living pressures? And it gives you the information. While inflation has dropped to 2.4%, higher prices are still impacting Australians. Meanwhile, the top 500 Australian corporations made almost $100 billion in additional profits. So, of course, first of all, let's talk about that question. That's clearly a leading question. It is trying to lead you down the path of thinking about the corporates as the enemy of little people. Now, that might be right or wrong, but of course it is clearly built-in bias. Then it gives you the options of what your response might be to that. So do you want to introduce a tax on excess profits of large corporations? Do you want to introduce short-term price caps, e.g. on rent and gas prices? Support a significant reduction of individuals employed by the public service? How does this relate? I don't know. You go figure. And prevent big companies from controlling the market and limiting consumer choice, e.g. supermarkets. Now, of course, that is not the full range of things that you could do to address corporations who are making more profits than you think is reasonable, or even simply it doesn't even define what the problem is that it's trying to solve. Is it an equality issue? Is it a super profits issue? Doesn't tell you. Anyway, I'm just going to click none of the above for the argument for the purposes of this. And now it asks you next about how the government should tackle the housing crisis. So, and then it talks about negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts for property investors, which apparently cost the taxpayer $33 billion annually. Now, every time you see the words a tax costing the taxpayer or the lack of a tax costing the taxpayer, really what they're saying is that they think people should be paying more tax, because if there is a tax that's not on people or they're getting a tax discount, then that's considered a cost to the budget. So they're saying put tax up. And of course, they give you some leading information in this question. Meanwhile, Australia's housing supply, which is low by international standards, has been making it more difficult to find a property to buy or rent. So again, a very leading question. And the options they give you are that you might want to phase out tax concessions for property investors, incentivise state or territory governments to increase renter rights and protections, increase investment in public and community housing, allow first-time home buyers to access their super to help purchase their first home, incentivise state territory governments to increase house supply, or help first home buyers with shared equity programs. So that would allow participants in to co-purchase a home with the government. Now, again, these are absolutely not the full range of options that might be available to tackle a housing crisis. People have also suggested things like caps on migration, and of course also changes to local laws to make it easier to build in certain areas. Again, I'm just going to click none of the above for the purposes of this experiment. And we go on to power bills, and again, leading questions. They give you a bit of information. This is what's called push polling. They tell you what you're supposed to think. They say this is all expert backed up. They're not actually really asking you a question. They're just using the opportunity to give you some information that they think is relevant. And then the options that they offer to cut household bills are energy bill rebates, increased financial support for efficiency upgrades, funding for community batteries, strengthening regulations to prevent price gouging by energy companies. Again, absolutely not the full gamut. And also not even, I would note, the full range of solutions being proposed by political parties at this election. So as we know, gas reservation and nuclear energy and other sort of forms of power have also been proposed as cost-saving measures. Just going to click again, none of the above, to move on here. So how should the federal government improve affordability and quality of education for Australians? Again, the cost of tertiary education is growing faster than inflation, and in 2024, the average funding gap between public and private schools was 2,971 per student, to the disadvantage of public schools. And then and this is hilarious, the answers that the survey offers to that, to the supposed difference in funding of public and private schools, is to make university education free and cut a portion of existing student debt. How does this even relate to the question the way it's framed above? It just doesn't. So more support for fee-free TAFE, etc. All of these things are policies of certain parts of politics, and it's really pushing you towards those. But again, we're not going to take the bait. We're going to go with none of the above. Then we're asked about climate pollution, and there is something I'll drop in at this moment. This tool is spearheaded, or at least the face of the group that made this tool. She's a climate activist. We don't know who it's funded by. Of course, they don't say on their website, but we can imagine that it could be associated with one of the political parties, maybe the Climate 200 Teal group. So Australia must aim for a 75% reduction in emissions by 2030 if we're to keep global warming to the safest levels possible, according to Climate Council analysis. Now, always question, who is the Climate Council? That's something I'll let you research for yourselves. But again, how are we going to cut climate pollution? What are the solutions that they offer here, or the options? Stop fossil fuel project approvals and expansions, accelerate the rollout of renewable energy projects, strengthen policies that ensure Australia's biggest polluters genuinely cut their emissions. Again, there is nothing here about nuclear, which is one of the main proposals from the opposition party at this election. And there are also nothing here of a whole range of other policy options which have been put on the table. So we're going to hit none of the above, and we're going to move on. How should the federal government ensure all Australians have access to affordable and accessible health care? So and then again, we get told about the bulk billing issue, and we get asked for a number of ways that we could, supposedly according to them, bring things down, which do not, again, fulfill the whole gamut of options. So we're just going to move right along here. Coal power stations set to retire. What are we going to do? This kind of question. Now, we do have nuclear energy as an option in this one, but of course they always put in a little bit of their information. They frame the information in the way they want it, while extending the life of coal and increasing gas use in the interim. So basically they're trying to push you away for that. And of course, if this weren't pretending to be just a neutral build a ballot sort of tool, then I would say fine. If this is how you want to frame things this way. But it's pretending to be neutral, so we really should call them out on that. And then how should the federal government improve transparency, accountability and integrity in politics and government? So again, what are the options here? Improve access to government-held information about government policies and decisions, protect the ABC and SBS's independence and funding, and require all lobbyists that meet with politicians to be publicly disclosed. Now, some of these things, I might sort of lean towards, but it is interesting. How does protecting the ABC and SBS's independence and funding lead to greater transparency into government? Given that, for instance, the SBS did a report on this Build a Ballot tool, which didn't say anything about who might be funding this and didn't mention at all the fact that it is skewed as hell. So, how should the federal government cut transport emissions? Okay, we've got options: make public transport more frequent and reliable, improve bike paths, which, by the way, is absolutely not a federal responsibility. Bike paths are a council responsibility, at the most a state responsibility where the roads come in, but certainly not a federal government thing, and increasing access and affordability of electric and low emissions vehicles. So then we get asked, what's the top issue impacting your vote at this election? So now, let's just say, I'm going to say housing, energy security, and what should we do as number 3? I will say infrastructure. Okay, so things which, and the things I've chosen for a reason. These are the things that are affecting ordinary Australians on a day-to-day basis, right? So really key issues at this election. Now, it asks me, of course, which party would you typically put as your number 1 preference? Now, I'm just going to hit none of the above on this one and see what it does for us. And there we go. How old are you? Now, let's say I'm going to say, because this tool is aimed at younger people, so I'm going to just say 18 to 24 on this one. And maybe just for the funsies, I will say non-binary. Okay, but I'm going to do this one properly. So I am in 2050, the city of Sydney. And let us have a look what it tells us here. So continue. Right, so what's it told us? Oh, look, it thinks that I should vote One Nation because I've pressed other on everything on the way through. And so the way that it has sorted what I should vote for is it's suggesting that I vote One Nation first, followed by Liberals, with the preferences in that order. Now, of course, you realise what would happen if somebody were to do that. So if I were leaning towards Tanya Plibersek and I put those two ahead, then any preferences, then basically my vote is out the window and negated. But then if you go through this and do your preferences on another matter, then it might prefer a left-wing person. But a lot of people I know who have chosen issues like housing and cost of living and energy security as their key issues have been given this right-wing option, like you should be voting One Nation. Now, what's going on here? This is not a One Nation tool. Clearly, this is really not a tool from that side of politics at all. But I'm wondering whether what they're hoping will happen with this is that people will choose those minor parties ahead of the Liberal Party, which will reduce the Liberal Party's vote in key areas. And at the same time, of course, I'm guessing that this tool has been built by people who want people to vote independence. So I'm guessing if we'd gone through this and done a kind of climate-friendly one, they'd be telling us to vote for the Greens in the city of Sydney, diluting Tanya Plibersek's vote. Now, of course, the city of Sydney, very safe seat, probably won't move away from Tanya, but it's interesting to see what they're doing here. So, right, they want me to add people to it, okay, they sort of open up like that. But that's just a little insight into what's going on here. And I just really wanted you to see how bent and biased this tool is, which is purporting to be completely neutral. Don't buy into it like you're being fooled. If you really do want to find out about these things, the AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission, has a lot of great information, as does Anthony Green's website on the ABC website. So do your own research. Don't believe this tool.